Welcome to Defenders Live. I am your host, Laura Thorson. Dakota Adelphia wears a lot of hats in the firearms community. She is a firearms instructor, concealed carrier, competitive shooter, California DOJ instructor, co-host of Gun Owners Radio, National Advisory Board member for A Girl and a Gun, and a consultant with Filster, where she helps develop education around concealed carry and everyday carry solutions. She teaches concealed carry courses in San Diego County and has become a leading voice for responsible gun ownership, effective concealment, and Second Amendment advocacy in one of the most restrictive states in the country. Through her work, she has helped thousands of people become safer, more confident, and more capable defenders. But Dakota's story goes far beyond firearms. It's a story of overcoming obstacles, refusing to quit when others tried to push her out, and learning how to fight for what matters without becoming bitter in the process. Today, we're talking about advocacy, concealed carry, training, and the mindset required to keep showing up when the path isn't easy. Before we get started, make sure you're subscribed, whether you're watching on Rumble or YouTube or listening on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or anywhere else you find this show. If you don't want to miss another episode, head to defenders-live.com and become a free subscriber. That way, every new episode gets delivered straight to your inbox. And if you're looking for top-tier firearms and self-defense training, go to defenders-usa.com and check the calendar to see what's coming to your area this year.
Thank you for that intro. That was so nice.
Yeah, well, I did my best. I do my best every time to try to, how do you describe a person like you, Dakota? I mean, the list goes on, right? I mean, what a story. It's amazing. And I see you on social media too, and I'm just like, I don't know how this girl does all this. This is nuts. Do you ever?
It is a little nuts. Yeah, I also have like a full-time 9 to 5. So.
Oh my goodness. Wow, that's amazing. And you have quite a story. I didn't really know anything about your backstory until I did a little bit more digging, and luckily you fed me some of it too through email, which I appreciate. So I do want to go into like the obvious things I would talk to Dakota about, right? Concealed carry, how you got into this world, and like all of the questions I have revolving around that. But first, I want to get to know you, like as a person, a little bit better, because how much can you really get to know someone on social media? I have people come up to me and they're like, oh, we watch your videos, and they feel like they know me, which is great because, you know, you want to just be yourself on camera. But there's a backstory to everyone, right? And there's a reason they are the way they are. And so I'm just curious, what are some of the things that led you down the path you're on now that have made you who you are today?
Yeah, that's a great question. I mean, I think when a lot of us think about who we are and how we got there, for a lot of us, you know, our childhoods were important stepping stones that kind of formed us and told us who we were in the world before we even had words to figure it out for ourselves. Mm-hmm. And I think I definitely had a fairly unique upbringing, and one that probably did kind of shape the way that I show up in the world and how I got to be the person that I am now. So I grew up just outside of Chicago in the Midwest, which is a very different world from San Diego.
Yeah.
And growing up outside of Chicago, you know, a lot of the information around firearms and shooting comes from the news, and it's all pretty negative. Mm-hmm. You know, there's a lot of gang violence in Chicago. There are, you know, gunshots in the neighborhood. And I never thought to myself, like, that could be a good guy defending his family. Like, mm-hmm. if I heard gunshots, I was thinking that's a bad guy. You know, mm-hmm. there was no positive connotation to firearms at all. Mm-hmm. And I didn't come from a particularly gun-friendly upbringing. You know, my dad was in the Army before I was born, and when I was very little, he was in the reserves. But aside from that, you know, we didn't have a firearm in the home, and we didn't really talk about guns related to self-protection or anything like that. But one thing my dad always did was help me see, like, what are the obvious potential problems in this room? And so anytime we'd walk into a gas station or, a store where it looked like something kind of sketchy was happening, he would remind us kids, if I tell you to go to the car, you are not going to look around. You're not going to wait. You're just going to go to the car. You're going to get in. You're going to lock the doors and you're going to wait for me to come out. And so we just always had these kinds of what if scenarios being thrown at us. And he did it in a really kind of fun way growing up. It was called Wouldn't It Be Bad? And it was just a game we played in the car. So, we'd be driving somewhere. Wouldn't it be bad if the car rolled over right now? Like, what would we do? How would we get out of the car? If we're upside down and our seatbelt is on, how would we get oriented so that we don't fall on our head when we unbuckle ourselves? It was just always these different skills, and not even related to self-defense, how many people in the firearms industry think of it, but more just like survival. What would you do? Wouldn't it be bad if an off-leash dog ran up and started attacking your brother? Like, what would you do? And so we just always played these kinds of games. And I think in a lot of ways, it kind of shaped the questions I asked myself as I, became a young woman and moved to a new state and went to college far away from my family. Wouldn't it be bad if a guy was following me back to my dorm? Wouldn't it be bad if, and it just kind of snowballed from there. And sometimes I tell this story and people think like, wasn't that so scary for you as a child? And it never felt that way to me. I actually felt more prepared as a child than scared. I thought, oh, my dad knows how to handle any problem that could come up. So I think for me, it got a little more scary when I realized like my dad's not going to college with me. My dad isn't going to be there if I, run in the door and somebody had been following me. Like I'm going to have to rely on these other 18-year-old kids who don't know what to do. And so I started kind of looking around and realizing no one else is worried about anything happening to them. But I would hear on the news, another college girl gets attacked on campus, or, somebody's Uber driver took them to the wrong place on purpose. And, you just start hearing these things. And I was like, why does no one else care about their own personal safety? Why is no one talking about personal responsibility? And so in a large part, I think that like upbringing and playing those games is what kind of led me to the path that I'm on now.
Well, I was going to intervene, but I didn't want to interrupt you, which was when you were saying, why aren't people like thinking about these things? Because it's easier not to. It's like, it's not a problem until it's a problem, Yeah. And so it's, for some people, it is really scary about thinking about those things. And it's a lot easier not to, and just be like, yeah, well, the probability of that is probably pretty slim. So I'm probably okay. I mean, that's how I was when I was a lot younger, just very naive to the environment around me and just thinking everyone was like me and had good intentions, and how could anything bad ever happen? You know what I mean? And that's not the way the world works. And so I think it's interesting that that's the kind of game you guys played in the car instead of I Spy or something like that.
We did our fair share of I Spy too, or the alphabet game. But I just think, growing up where I did, and, my dad, there were plenty of situations when I was younger where my dad did have to like have a physical altercation with somebody, or, we got hit by a drunk driver and my dad had to like wrestle the drunk driver to the ground and wait for cops to come and things like that. And so in my childhood, I just kind of knew like bad things could happen at any time, and you'd hear about, a neighbor kid getting mauled by a dog that got loose or things like that. And so I think just growing up, there was an awareness that a lot of kids who grow up maybe in a little bit of a more insulated bubble don't even think about, so I think you mentioned the word naive, which I think is a really good one, because oftentimes I didn't think it was this like willful, like, let me, la, 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 nothing bad is happening. It didn't feel like that among my friends. It just felt like they didn't even know what could be out there. They had never been touched by anything tragic. Right. And so their whole concept of life was how you were saying, people are nice. Most people want to be helpful. And I think statistically that is true. But when you grow up in an environment where you're just aware that there are bad people and bad things happen even to good people, it just helps you kind of make decisions that are influenced by that knowledge. And so, I never felt scared per se. I just felt aware. And to me, that was like the confidence that I needed to be able to go out in the world on my own. I moved to college when I was 17, and I, was all alone in a new state with almost no friends, no relationships really. I had one family that I knew, and that was pretty much it. And so I think for me, that knowledge that, if we're prepared and if we're thinking about things, we'll be safer. Like, that's really what gave me the confidence to go out and do it.
And that's common sense to you, right? Because of the way that you grew up. And so that, I think, helps make you an even better like instructor to other people, because it's just natural to you to think that way and be that way. And so getting in probably to the self-defense world was probably a pretty like no-brainer, I would imagine.
Yeah. It came about in kind of an interesting way, but yes, once I was there, I was like, this is definitely what I'm supposed to be doing. And I felt very confident in kind of my journey here, that this is definitely what I am supposed to do. And I am supposed to help teach, mostly women. I had about 800 female students last year, about 200 male students. So I definitely trend more female students in general because of my Girl and a Gun chapter. But I definitely feel strongly that I'm supposed to be helping people make smart choices for their lives.
Well, I'm debating whether to go backwards or go forwards right now, because I wanted to hear more about your story about doing hard things. Let's pause the timeline. I want to go back to that, because I am all about doing hard things. I mean,
yes, you are, girl. It is your tactical game stuff and all your working out. It's so inspiring.
I'm excited about doing hard things. I'm excited about showing other people that they can do hard things. That's like, that just brings me so much joy to do that. And so when I heard you talking about it, I'm like, oh, tell me more. Tell me more about that. And not just like for the sake of doing it, but like what has doing hard things done for you in your life? Why do you think it's so important for young people to do that? And tell us some stories, because there's like a hand gliding thing, and then there's a biking across America. What? When you were like 17?
Yeah, when I was 15 years old. 15. So I'll start kind of a little bit earlier, because I think it sets the stage a little bit. So I grew up, like I mentioned, just outside of Chicago, and I was homeschooled for my entire life, actually. So I went to a preschool that was with other kids, and then starting in kindergarten, I was homeschooled all the way through. And my mom struggles with some mental health problems and some other things. And so once I was probably about 4th grade, 5th grade, it became, I think, very challenging for her to give me the type of education that I needed to excel in a traditional school setting. And so from about 5th grade until 11th grade, I did not have a formal curriculum at all. All of my education in those years really came from like me enjoying reading and, learning things about making money. I was working a lot when I was younger. And so, I taught piano lessons starting at like 10 or 11. So I always had these like little side business going, and I was always busy doing things, crocheting, donating baby blankets, whatever. Like, I just liked being busy, but I did not do like a traditional education. I was so behind in math and science. I didn't know really how to even do like simple, solve for X type stuff. It was very remedial. And so my parents eventually divorced, and we all moved in full time with our dad. And once that shift happened, my dad and I started having conversations about, I was 15 at this time. So we started having conversations about the future and, what does my life look like? What could I be? What could I do? And, he was always a very strong proponent of college, and neither of my parents were college educated. We, grew up fairly poor, and for him, he always viewed college as like your get out of, get out of jail free card kind of. You get to make whatever kind of a life you want. And so I was 15. My dad and I are talking about the future, and he's bringing up college. And I'm like, well, how am I going to go to college? I haven't been in school since 5th grade. Like, this is going to be an uphill battle. And so we ended up looking up the requirements for graduating high school. And, my mom had been submitting attendance records on our behalf, even though we hadn't been doing any kind of formal education. And so we were able to create a transcript for high school that looked like I had done a freshman and sophomore year at school. And so we met the requirements for me to enter a school as a junior. And obviously it was all fake. I gave myself straight A's and all these topics that I had never even learned about. And then we entered into an online program for, it was mostly for like at-risk youth, but it was just kind of an entry level to public school. And I was like, I can't go sit in a classroom with all these kids who know how to do this stuff, because it's going to be obvious that this is all a lie. So we did the online school. I paid a tutor lots of hours to like help me get up to speed on everything. I was working as a lifeguard at that point, and was paying this tutor to help me pass my classes essentially. And so after my junior year of high school, I went to a traditional public school and was able to graduate after my senior year. My experience in public school was really tough. I don't envy anybody who had a similar, educational story, because you are learning things that you should have learned like 10 years prior practically. And, my math especially was really difficult for me to get all the way caught up. But when I did, and I was able to graduate, that gave me a piece of paper from the state that said I was a high school graduate. So I was able to use that and apply to colleges. They wouldn't have accepted my fake homeschooling transcript. So when I was 15, I knew at the end of the day, I have to end up in a public school if I want to go to college. And so that ended up working out. I applied to one college, because it was expensive. I'm sure it still is, but at the time it was really expensive to apply to colleges. And I applied to San Diego State and got accepted, and decided to move, halfway across the country to go to college.
Wow.
So that was, definitely a difficult journey, but really I feel like it kind of started there, because then I am at college at this new place. I had chosen civil engineering as my 4-year program. And that came literally from a Google search. I said, what job field is, good job security and good money? Because I knew I'm going to have to take loans out. I'm going to have to be able to pay them back. And so
you didn't go based off your interests?
No, not at all. I wasn't interested in really anything. I didn't know what to be interested in, because school was just so hard for me. That every topic was hard. I had never learned, a lot of things about history.
So you might as well just go for gold, I guess.
Right. Like diagramming sentences felt like math to me too. So I was like, no matter what I pick, it's going to be hard. So I might as well pick something that can help me pay off my loans.
Oh my goodness.
So I picked engineering, and, I think the main thing and kind of the reason I tell that story is because on a regular basis, I was being tested. Was I stubborn enough? Was I strong enough? Was I willing to put in the work that it took to do this thing? Did I care about it enough? Did I want it bad enough? Mm-hmm. And I had to keep choosing it. At any day in that whole time period, I could have been like, this is too hard. I don't need a high school diploma. I'll just get my GED. I'll just, work as a lifeguard forever, whatever. But I knew I was stubborn enough. I knew I could do it if I kept trying. And I was willing to fail. My freshman year of college, I failed a lot of classes. I had to get a whole nother set of tutors to help with math and stuff. But
wow.
At the end of the day, I just kept asking myself, is this something you still want? Because if you still want it, you can do it. And, I remember calling my dad my freshman year And I was crying. I said, all these kids that went to public school, they're all struggling in these classes. These classes are just too hard. And he said, he basically told me, if you think it's too hard, it will be too hard. And if you think it's not too hard, it won't be too hard. And is it going to suck? Like, yeah, it's going to suck. And you can call me crying whenever you want. But if you want this, do it. Like, just keep at it. And I got off the phone and I was like, all right, I'm not gonna quit. They will have to kick me out of this program. And if they kick me out because I'm failing too many classes, then that's what it is.
Oh my gosh, Dakota, you are my kind of girl. I just have to say, you are my kind of girl.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. It was an interesting couple of years there. But, at the end of the day, I'm a licensed civil engineer. I practice in engineering, and, it took a long time, but I got to where I wanted to be.
Wow. And that's just one story. I mean, that's just one example.
Yeah, there were so many things.
Yeah, you call it stubborn, but I'm wondering, is it something else? Is it grit? I don't know.
Grit is a great word. Grit is a great book for anybody who hasn't read it.
Yeah.
It's a fantastic book about, basically the premise of it is that there's these kids who go to SEAL school. They try to become Navy SEALs, and some of them can't. They quit, or they don't want to. And what's the difference between the ones that make it and the ones that don't? And it's a really fantastic read.
Yes, it is. And it talks about how grit is built too. Yeah. And I think one of the things I love personally the most about grit is that it's not reliant on your past, like as far as where you came from. Like, right. It's just like a part of who you are, your DNA or whatever. I don't know. And you build it. Like, I think I built it unknowingly as a kid, just like you did.
Yeah. Through
through all the different, situations that we've both been through, and I'm grateful for it. I remember when I was in I don't want to make this about me, but this popped in my head when Ross Hick interviewed me. He said something to the effect of like, why do you think that you've made it as far as you have? And I said something like, well, I think it's probably just my willingness to do hard things. It's really weird. It's hard to describe. I like to think about how I got here and what my part in that was, other than being willing to do hard things.
That's a pretty big thing.
Okay.
You say that like that's, I just willing to do hard things.
But I'm made for that. I'm made for that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But
my whole life's prepared me for that.
But did you always feel that? Did you from an early age feel like you were made for hard things?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
It's just like who you are. It's like you can't fake that in people. They either have it or they don't have it. I think it can be built to some degree, but so talk about the other. I want to hear the story about the biking thing. Was that another hard thing that you did that it helped solidify your confidence in yourself? It sounds like, for when you did end up in California. What was that all about?
I think so, definitely. So that's an interesting one. So I don't know that I actually have really ever fully told this story on any interview. So this
really?
Is fun.
Oh, yeah.
When I was 15, we were in the process of losing our home, and we were just financially, it was really tough times. And so we had, basically decided we have this time where we're not going to have a place to live, and we haven't been loving where we live anyway. So we had this unique opportunity to move and do something different. And so it started with just kind of family chats of okay, what would a family adventure be? A road trip or, that kind of thing. Mm-hmm. And my dad, I vividly remember I was sitting in, we had a little RV that was parked in our driveway, and we thought we might have to move into the RV because we were losing our house. And so I'm sitting in the RV, organizing some of my things. And my dad comes in and he's like, what do you think about hiking the Appalachian Trail? And I was like, how long does it take? Because I didn't know. And he said, maybe 6 months. My brother was 8. My little brother was 8.
Oh, wow.
At the time. And so he said 6 months. And I was like, absolutely not. I need cell service. I have a cell phone now. I'm so cool. I got to stay in touch with my friends. Like, you can't make me leave my home and also not have cell service for 6 months. Like, absolutely not. I don't want to do that. And he was like, okay, like, if we decide that's what we're doing, you're just going to have to get on board, but I'll take that under advisement, kind of thing.
Mm-hmm.
And so the next idea he had was a bicycle trip. And again, I'm like, well, how long is it going to take? He said, oh, maybe 3 months. I was like, okay, it's a little bit better than 6 months. I was like, are we going to have service? It's like, yeah, most of the time, we'd be like on main roads and stuff. I'm like, okay, like maybe I could get on board with that. So he bought some GMC Denali's from Walmart. And the idea behind that particular bike was that there's Walmarts everywhere in the country. And so if something broke on it, we'd be able to get replacement parts really easy. And then he got him and my little brother a tandem bicycle. So my dad on the front, my brother on the back, and then I'm on my GMC Denali. And we started just riding around in the neighborhood and kind of thinking about, maybe this is something we would do. And so my dad kind of planned this whole trip based on the southern tier of the United States. So a few months later, we packed up his pickup truck. He had an old red work truck that wasn't even sure if it was going to make it to Florida, but packed up the truck, took our bicycles, and, we had little trailers that we pulled behind on the bikes, and took all that stuff out on the beach in Jacksonville, Florida, and put a sign up on the truck that it was for sale, and sold the truck for cash, and got on our bikes and started pedaling.
Wow.
So we started the trip October 11th, and we got to San Diego January 9th, or maybe January 6th. I forget which one, either the 6th or the 9th. But yeah, just under 3 months from coast to coast.
Wow. What was the best and worst of that trip?
The best, I would say, was just the people. There were so many good people that we met. We obviously, like I mentioned before, we had like almost no money. So we were eating very cheaply, making peanut butter and jelly sandwiches. We were sleeping in a tent a lot of the time, very, rarely did hotels. And sometimes we would just be, 40, 50 miles outside of a town. And I'd say, let me call around and see if the church or somebody in that town would be willing to let us sleep inside instead of, finding a place to tent camp. And so all throughout the South, I would call these Baptist churches in the next town, and they were all so nice.
Really?
They were so willing. Sometimes the pastor's family would be like, no, we'll do you one better. You're going to come sleep in our house, So we just got taken to dinner and all sorts of things the whole way. And we were raising money for the Susan G. Komen Breast Cancer Foundation, just as kind of a side note of the trip. And we had, a little banner on the back of our trailer, our pull behind that said Susan G. Komen Research and stuff. And so people would stop and tell us stories about somebody that they lost to breast cancer, or, we met this guy whose wife was currently in the process of passing away from breast cancer. And he thought it was like a sign that he saw us on the side of the street, like a sign that she was, even though she was going to pass away, that she was going to be okay, and his life was going to be okay. And so we just got to hear all these amazing stories from people. We had a family in Texas that pulled off on the side of the road, and they were like, do you guys want showers? And we were like, sure, so we end up at these people's house and, take a shower. And they at some point mentioned, we got this big backyard and we've got some guns. Like, do you guys like shooting guns? So we got to shoot guns in their backyard. It's just like when you think of the South and Southern hospitality, it was being lived out for us the entire way. It was a really amazing way to see some of the salt of the earth people that live in America.
That's cool. And the worst was sleeping in the tent?
The worst was probably just the headwinds, honestly. Those were mentally the most tough days. Hilly, terrain for the most part. It's like, well, if you go up, you have to come down. So you can kind of tell yourself that.
Mhm.
But we had 28 days getting across Texas, and it was pretty brutal headwinds most of that time. Texas was really mentally tough because it just felt like it was never ending. It's like every morning you wake up and you pedal straight into the wind in Texas. And like at some points the wind was so bad you're pedaling and you can see the lane lines on the freeway and you can see you're not really going forward very much, but you feel like you are. And so that was pretty mentally difficult. But
and you're 15 at this point.
Yeah, I was 15.
I mean, Dakota, I hate to say this out loud, but it's just how I feel. Like, how many 15-year-olds do you know that have done anything like that? And then second of all, let's say not done anything like that, had the opportunity to do anything like that. That's really what it's about. And then also would have the fortitude to think about calling churches in the town you're getting ready to come into in order to get help. Like, it takes a certain kind of person to think that way. I mean, there's some adults I know that don't think that way. So yeah, that speaks a lot about you. I bet your dad is pretty cool. I'd like to meet him someday.
He is pretty cool. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's funny because sometimes people are like, oh my God, I can't believe you were forced to do that or whatever. And I never thought of it that way at all. Like, sure, at the time when he was like, this is what we're doing, was I like, oh, wow, this sounds so amazing? No, I was like complaining like any 15-year-old kid would have. But once we started, I think I really realized like, this is a once in a lifetime opportunity. Like, if my plan works out, if I end up going to college, like, I'm going to have a normal job. It's going to be really hard to get away for 3 months ever again in my life, So I think even at that age, I kind of knew like this was a special opportunity that not a lot of people, like you said, get a chance to do something like that. Yeah. And it's funny because oftentimes, we think about whether we can afford to do something. We were like the definition of we could not afford to do anything, and so this was like almost a free thing. Yeah. It doesn't cost much to ride bicycles from one side of the country to the other. You have to eat whether you're eating PB&Js in Florida or in New Mexico, right? Like, it was a very affordable thing as far as like a family adventure, much cheaper than, gas in a road trip or an RV or whatever. But it definitely took a lot of fortitude and grit to do because it was a physical challenge,
Oh yeah, definitely. It does not sound like fun to me at all, but I also don't like biking. So that's probably why. I would probably rather run than bike. Honestly, if I had to choose, I'd probably choose running over biking, but, okay. So where do we go from here? Let's get back into the future again, unless I'm missing something, because now I'm curious about, okay, you have this kind of upbringing. We know that you have awareness of your surroundings. You are going to college. You've been on this huge biking adventure. You've definitely proven in many ways that you have what it takes to do whatever you set your mind to. And at this point in your life, I imagine you know this about yourself. I mean. But when you got to California, you uprooted and went there. I'm curious, was there ever a moment either when you moved or when you started getting into the firearms community where you started having doubts about things? And what did that look like? There had to have been doubts somewhere along the way.
Yeah. I think that, to kind of put the San Diego decision into context, we finished our bicycle trip in San Diego and we ended up staying for a couple of months and then we moved to Colorado. This is my dad, my brother, and I lived in Colorado through the rest of my high school. I graduated from a public school there. And then I decided to go back to San Diego just because I had loved it when we were here. So I had gotten to see, what does it look like to live on the coast? I had never experienced that before. The ocean is something that definitely drew me to San Diego. I had been a lifeguard. I loved swimming. And there was just a piece of me that was like, I think I need to live by the water. Like, I think that's a piece of this.
Yeah.
And so when I moved to California, I was not at all into shooting. You know, I had had a handful of gun-related experiences in my life. Nothing particularly negative. You know, I shot in those folks' backyard. I shot in high school maybe like twice. But really that was, you know, it was just kind of this like thing you can do. But to me, it wasn't an option of like, oh, I'm going to get a gun someday or whatever. Like, it just wasn't something I thought of at all.
Yeah.
So when I got to San Diego, I was just, you know, kind of a normal college kid struggling through classes. And I would say it wasn't until, you know, a couple of years into my engineering degree and starting to get into firearms that I realized that, you know, I didn't align with a lot of the folks that lived here as far as their overview or their outlook on how the government should be involved in private citizens' lives. And I had never been a very political person. And to be honest, I'm still not a very political person, except for when it comes to Second Amendment rights. And my outlook on that just, you know, stronger and stronger over the years was, it's crazy that the government lets me take out student loans, lets me sign a lease on an apartment, lets me own and drive a car, but will not let me own a firearm because I'm not 21. I'm trusted to make all of these adult decisions, but I could not defend my life if somebody broke into my apartment in the middle of the night. And that was something that just made me really mad. And I was like 20 at this time. And another piece, I think, of why I felt like San Diego was the right place was because I met my now husband my freshman year of college. And so we got together really young and, you know, went through all of our college experience together and all of that. I'm sure if I hadn't found my person, my partner, I probably would have considered moving out of San Diego after college just because of that piece of it, because I didn't find that there was a lot of community for me here of folks who believed in the Second Amendment the way that I did and believed that, you know, carrying a firearm is a human right. I had many conversations with my college friends about that concept, and everybody that grew up here, you know, kind of has the same view on things. Guns kill people. Guns are bad. California's gun laws are working. California gun laws are why we don't have as many mass shootings. You know, they had all of this kind of, I guess, you know, depends how you want to phrase it, but all of this misinformation, perhaps you could say, about, you know, what people use guns for and why people may want to own or carry a gun. And when I started carrying a gun, I did lose friends over that, you know, just kind of generally when I came out on social media as a gun owner, as somebody who concealed carried, I did lose some relationships. And I think at that point in my life, I was like, is this really the place I'm supposed to be? More just because I felt like an outsider. I felt like I didn't have community here. And I intentionally went out and found community. And now I'm very happy that I live in San Diego.
And now you create community for others.
Yeah. We do a lot of community building. You know, I run a chapter of A Girl and a Gun now, and just seeing these women show up and most of them not having any friends who shoot a gun when they come to us. And now they're surrounded by, you know, 200 gun girls that are going to the range every weekend. And, you know, we have 5 or 6 events a month. And so it's just really fun to like watch them all become friends.
Oh, maybe you were planted there for a reason, Dakota.
Yeah, that's what I think now, you know, but I think at the time I was just kind of like, where are all the gun people?
If you've been listening to Defenders Live and something in you knows it's time to go deeper, not just in your training, but in your life, become a paid subscriber of Defenders Live. Each month we meet for a live group call, having real conversations about physical growth, emotional discipline, and spiritual strength. You'll be part of a growing community of people just like you, committed to becoming true defenders of life and of their families. This isn't about being perfect. It's about showing up, doing the work, and not doing it alone. So go to defenders-live.com and become a paid subscriber. and take your next step toward becoming the kind of defender this world desperately needs. Because didn't you have some not so great experiences early on? Could you speak to some of those? What was that all about? Some not great instructors, it sounds like.
Well, yeah, that for sure. So I think, one of the things I feel really passionate about and what I try to do with A Girl and a Gun and with my intro to handgun classes is providing an experience that's positive. Because if you go to the range for your first time ever and you get hurt, you get slide bite, you feel scared, out of control, you very well may never touch a gun again. And not only are we losing someone who could have potentially been, a responsible gun owner, but we're also losing somebody that could have been an advocate for the Second Amendment and an advocate for responsible gun ownership in their circles. So we're not just losing that person, we're losing everybody that person knows. And I take that really as like a personal responsibility of mine. I take it really seriously, partially because of some of the early on experiences I had. Going to a gun range and asking questions and feeling belittled or berated for not knowing the right terminology. I remember saying clip instead of magazine and getting a lecture from the gun store guy. And that lecture did not make me feel like, oh, I should go learn more about terminology. It made me feel like I don't belong with these people. I don't belong here. I don't know enough. I'm not welcome. And early on, I had taken some kind of group classes, and I had many bad experiences with group classes early on, instructors that had the drill sergeant mentality and persona where, it's very macho and ego and, yelling at you when you do something wrong instead of, positive reinforcement, even if your target looks bad. And so early on, I remember telling my boyfriend, husband now, I don't know that I could do well in this environment. Like, I think I need to find something different. And so I also had an experience at a range where I had a malfunction. And when the range safety officer came in, I had just sat the gun down on the bench in a safe direction, hadn't broken any of the rules. But I went out and said, hey, my gun malfunctioned. I don't know what to do. And he comes in and he berates me on the range about, oh, you never set down a loaded gun and, da-da-da. And I held it together as much as I could in the moment. But as soon as he finished clearing my gun, I packed it up, I left, I went in the car and I cried. And I think back to those early days and how tenacious I had to be to keep showing up and keep trying, even though I felt like I was really being, kind of bullied in the early days. And when I look back, I actually think that those instructors probably had good intentions. I think that they just were very set in their ways and unable to modulate for how the student was showing up. So they probably teach a lot of ex-military guys who like being yelled at and need a little bit of that push you against each other kind of vibe. But that's not what I needed in my journey early on. Yeah. And so I think, there's thousands of women across the country who are showing up for their first ever intro to handgun at a range. And that may be the last time they touch a gun. And as instructors, I think we really need to be mindful of how we are, making people feel welcome, how we're encouraging folks to come back, even if they don't know very much, even if they do something wrong. When you're fresh and you don't know any better, being yelled at isn't the way to help you learn, Yeah. So yeah, I think a lot of women have had similar experiences in the early days.
Yeah. Yep. I agree with everything you said. And I know a lot of the same feelings that you had were some of the feelings I've had too. But I, like you, I think we're both just stubborn enough that we're no matter what, it might suck and we might cry, but we'll be back, Right. But not everyone's like that. Most people aren't like that. And that's what we have to remember. And it's really sad to hear that we could be we could be like, I'd never looked at it the way that you just said it. Like, it's not just about that woman, that one woman. It's about who that woman knows. And then to think that from that one experience, she could possibly think to herself, well, this just isn't for me. I'm going to have to figure out a different way to defend myself. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And that's fine. There's many different ways, but if that's one way that she really wanted to learn about, and because of that experience, she's never coming back. That just saddens my heart, honestly. So then tell me about A Girl and a Gun, because it's a very special organization, and I know that you wouldn't be as involved with it as you are if there wasn't a good reason. I don't take you for someone who flippantly gets involved with things without, doing your research, knowing what it's about, making sure it aligns with your values is what I'm getting from you. Yeah. I could be wrong. So tell me, what is it about A Girl and a Gun that makes it different, or a standout organization that you wanted to be a part of?
Yeah. So when I first got my gun, my boyfriend already had gotten one. He turned 21 first. And so we had gone to the range together a few times. I had some sort of negative range experiences, some of what I already mentioned. And then I went to get my first gun at a different range because I was like, maybe a different place, different faces, different people, maybe they'll be nicer. So I go to this range, and very nice man sold me a Smith & Wesson M&P Shield. And, I think for all intents and purposes, it was probably exactly what I was asking for. I told him, I think I'm going to conceal carry a gun. And so, when I look back, I'm like, that was a good choice for what I showed up telling him. Mm-hmm. But that gun ended up being pretty snappy. It was really hard to lock back. I had a lot of challenges just like manipulating the gun.
That was my first concealed carry gun too.
Oh, was it?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it was an interesting first gun to start out with. Mm-hmm. If I had a redo button, I would have gone with something a little easier to start. Yeah. But when I got that gun, I would make my boyfriend load it for me and then put it in the holster and put it in the safe because I couldn't close the slide. Or I would go to unload it and I wouldn't be able to get the slide to lock open. I'd have to use an empty magazine and then rack it, and then it would stay open. And so one day I was just like thinking, this is so stupid that I have this gun and I can't even use it right. Like, I had this malfunction at the range the other day. I needed help clearing it. Like, this is dumb. Like, what if that happened when somebody was in my apartment? Like, what am I doing with my life? And so I was, telling myself, like, you haven't had good experiences when you've tried to get some education. So let's see if there's like a gentler way to learn. And so for me, kind of just the thought that popped in my head was, I wonder if there's a female instructor. And not that I, am against learning from men. And, to this day, my training resume has way more male instructors than it does female. But when I was in that kind of vulnerable spot, what was calling to me was a more gentle approach. And I'm sure I could have found a man that was willing to have that gentle approach, but a woman just felt like a safe place to start because I was feeling a little bit worn down from the experiences I had had. And so I Googled women shooting organizations and, shooting lessons for women, things like that. And I found a different women's group that I tried out once and didn't really feel like it was a good fit for me. And then I found A Girl and a Gun. And when I called the number for the San Diego chapter, it was a real live person who was happy to answer all my questions, who, talked me through what classes I could take from them. And it was a very gentle intro into formal education. Mm-hmm. And my first event that I showed up, it's like female range safety officers, it's female instructors, it's just like girl power all the way around. And it was not macho, and it was not ego, and there was no competition. There was no, feelings of inadequacy. I was able to show up, say, I don't know how to clear a malfunction. I can't lock my slide back on my own. And nobody made me feel small for that. Nobody made me feel like I didn't belong. And I think that experience, just that first day, I was like, I will take any classes these people have. Like, I'll take them all. And so I ended up getting really involved, taking a lot of, holster training, and Tatiana Whitlock came to town. The San Diego chapter had brought her in. And so she was like my first formal, like full day class that I had ever taken. And so I just had all these good experiences right off the bat. And the facilitator of the San Diego chapter at the time was wanting to retire, unbeknownst to me. And when she met me, she thought to herself, over time, I think that this girl could do a good job running the chapter if we could get her up to speed. And so she had me take range safety officer classes and pistol instructor. And I didn't know yet what this was leading up to, but she helped me get a bunch of different credentials. And, I took OC spray with Chuck Haggard and all these different things over the first, year and a half. And eventually she approached me about taking over the chapter so that she could retire. And when I made the decision to say yes to that, I also kind of made a promise to myself that I was going to continue my own personal education, that I was going to continue to try to be the best instructor I could, and that I owed it to these women in the future that would come to me. I owed it to them to be the best version of a shooter and an instructor as I could. And so I got involved with, TACCon, a Girl and a Gun National Conference, all the different training, any instructor you can think of that's kind of on the national circuit, I tried to take a class from. I've got lots and lots of training hours at this point. But all of that came from the foundation of a Girl and a Gun, and the I guess I don't want to call it requirement, because it's not required, but there is this culture of encouraging more education. And even though they don't force facilitators to take a certain number of continued education training hours or anything like that, there is constantly new classes that you can choose from, and they're constantly creating new curriculums and offering them to facilitators to take and to learn. And I think that is what sets a Girl and a Gun apart from a lot of the other organizations out there, is the focus on high quality. You have to pass the FBI qual. You have to demonstrate, you have to have Stop the Bleed certificates. You have to demonstrate insurance and all of that. But they're very on top of making sure that you are providing good quality information to the girls that are coming to your chapters. And that's something that just really is important to me on a personal level, because when we're helping people with self-defense, we're potentially helping them save their own lives. And, it has to be high quality information.
Yeah. I think that's, maybe I should be careful about what I say, but I was going to say, I think some instructors forget that it's not about them. It's about the people they're serving. And I, like you, feel a very heavy responsibility, but it's not a burden. It's a blessing,
Right.
A heavy responsibility to be as educated as I can, be as skilled as I can, and be a servant to these people, because we have a lot of, we're not at all alike, in some ways, but there's a lot of parallel tracks going on there that I can relate to your story in so many ways. And so it's cool to meet someone like you that in some ways has like a similar path. So yeah, that's really cool. There's so much I didn't know about you that I'm learning. So this is a fun interview. I really appreciate you taking all this time. Let's switch gears here if you're okay with it. And I don't know how much more time we have, but I want to ask you these questions because I was sent. So you consult with Filster, which is Holster Enigma. And I love the Enigma. I don't know how long it's been now. 4 years, I think I've been wearing the Enigma, and it's my everyday carry with my CC9. And I'm going to ask all the dumb questions, Dakota, because I don't know what I don't know. And like I said, I think if I don't know it, maybe other people don't know it. So my first question is a really obvious thing, which is, okay, this is the newer version of the Express, the Enigma Express. And this was sent to me, but this is the Enigma, the older version of it. And so, and like I told you, I'm totally cool about wearing this, but I have to like get it all set up and blah, 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 blah. And it's like, this thing works awesome. If it ain't broke, don't fix it. But I probably should upgrade. So I'm in with the in crowd, you know, but like, what's the difference? I don't know. What's the difference?
That's not a stupid question. There's not a ton of differences. The original, the one that you have been using, that one was made of a different material. And over time, if people were really cranking it down, or if they had a holster that wasn't, you know, maybe evening the pressure on the faceplate, the Tegris would start to crease. Sometimes it would fray and start to fall apart. And so the new material is just a little bit more robust. It's not going to fray. It's not going to crack. It's very robust. It's going to stand up.
Oh yeah, I can feel the difference. I can feel the difference.
Another thing is, like, a pretty common complaint we got from folks was that the Tegris was so slippery that if you were wearing like gym shorts or something a little silky, it would kind of slide around on the faceplate of the Enigma. And the newer one, that injection molded one, it has a little bit of texture on it. And that's just supposed to help your clothes kind of sit still, so they're not sliding around on the faceplate. Now, for people who didn't have that problem, they're not going to notice a difference. But for people who had that problem, they like the new.
Well, it looks cooler. I can tell it looks cooler. I mean, that's really the only thing I can tell a difference in. I can tell, obviously, there's a difference in the material, but I've literally never had an issue with my Enigma. Once I got it dialed in, which sometimes takes some time, and it did for me, but like, this is my ride or die holster setup, because I can literally do anything with this. And nobody ever believes me when I say that. And maybe I just need to make more videos, but like, there is no distance I can't run with this holster on, with zero chafing. My gun does not move. I don't even know it's there. This thing is like a part of my body. It's like another, it's just like, So, and once it's dialed in, it's good to go. And you get the right wedge. Is this a new and different wedge, or is just like a standard?
That is a new one. So we used to sell the modular wedge kit, which came with a bunch of different shapes, and you would trim them out. These ones are a little bit more specific to the problems that we saw most people having. Most people need a little bit of grip tuck, and they need a little bit of grip rotation. And so those wedges are made to kind of do both of those things. So they help tuck in your grip and they help rotate it a little bit.
Okay, cool. What else did I get? Oh, the sport belt. I think the sport belt upgrade is a must-have for me.
Yeah. For a lot of people who are really active, it's super helpful because of that elastic component. It moves with you. And so you don't have to like tighten it over time. If I am going to like work out or run or anything like that, the sport belt is for sure what I'm going for. If I'm going to be just like sitting or standing most of the day, I don't mind using the regular belt, but the sport belt's really helpful for folks who are super active for sure. I don't know if you noticed, the material on the belt is a little bit softer now. It's a little bit more like a seat belt, a little silkier. And the old one was a little bit more rough, you know, if you feel the texture of it. So that's just supposed to help with skin comfort.
You're just refining at this point. I mean, you're not reinventing anything. You just keep making it better. Now, I feel really dumb for asking this question. I should know what this is and why it's important, but I don't.
No, so you may not need it. That might be why you haven't used it.
I don't know if I need it. Reduced
size buckle is just because if you look at your faceplate plus your fidlock, which is the magnetic buckle. For folks who are very narrow hip to hip, the fidlock is probably running into their hip bone, or the faceplate is like running off of their body. So for some folks, depending on how you're shaped, you might want to shorten up the total length that the Enigma is taking on your frame. And that's what the reduced size buckle does.
Totally makes sense. See, I knew there was an easy answer to that. Yeah. I mean, for you guys that aren't familiar with the Enigma, look me up or look her up and she'll tell you more than me. But like, I promote these, especially for my women shooters who are like wearing leggings and having trouble concealing. And most of them are like thinking they're going to have to be wearing like cargo pants and a belt everywhere they go if they want to conceal carry. I'm like, no, you do not have to. And I just shout from the rooftops about this because it's changed everything about the way that I carry. That's like just no smoke at all. And look at this. This thing is just so easy. Just bloop. And
the magnetic clip. I love the magnetic clip. That's why I won't go to the reduced size buckle because it's like a normal belt.
It is. Oh,
I love the fit lock. It's so convenient.
Yeah.
And then the new Enigma also comes with 2 different leg leashes around your thigh option.
Yeah.
It comes with an alternative where you kind of like a climbing harness. It goes in between your legs and then it connects in the back of the sport belt. So that you don't have the line around your thigh, which I find for a lot of ladies.
There's 2?
Exactly. Yeah, there's 2 in there.
Is this one wider? No, they're the same.
Yes. Yeah, it was a slightly different material and slightly wider than the original.
Wow. I can't believe that all of that just comes standard. Like the upgrades are like the reduced buckle or the sport belt, but like 2 leg leashes come with it. That's crazy.
Yeah, and you also get different wing insert heights. So like your Express came with the short wing insert, but you get the taller one too, in case you need a little more grip rotation. So yeah.
And this cool brochure is actually really well made. I'm a graphic designer, and anything that I see in print that looks really well done, I'm weird like that. I'm a geek about well done graphic design and things that are printed that feel good in my hands. Are you like that too? Like when I feel a business card, someone hands me one, I pay attention to the quality of that business card.
Oh, that's so funny.
I know.
I can't say that I've ever thought about that, but I will say that when I saw that graphic, I really liked it.
It's really good. So this is what you're talking about.
Yeah,
there's like different options that you can put on here.
Exactly. So if you find that, when you do your poke and check, so you put your shirt down, you have your gun on, and you poke on the problem area, the part of the gun that's printing, you'll notice what else happens, right? So if your grip is printing and you poke it in and there's space for it to go into your body, there's room on your frame for it to rotate, then we want to do something that's going to keep it in that rotated configuration so that you're not constantly having to poke it to stop the printing, right? So the wing insert is there so that you can have it kind of permanently rotated further in. And not every frame is going to need it. Not every shape requires a larger wing insert, but we throw it in there in case you're one of the shapes that needs it.
That's kind of over the top service. I mean, honestly, because usually when you buy something like that, it's like, well, it either works or it doesn't work. And if it doesn't work, you got to buy 10 more things to make it work, and that's really frustrating. So there was a bunch of stuff in that bag. I didn't even know what it was. So thank you, Dakota, for breaking all that down. Sweet. Well, I'm excited to, I don't know. I think I'm going to be moving on.
I think it's worth it, especially if you're going to be using the new leg leash. I think the new leg leash definitely is a great option. And for anyone who is curious about the Enigma, I will say this. I work for Filster, but I'm not on their sales team. I'm not paid to sell the product, so anything you see on my Instagram that is me wearing the Enigma, that's not because I'm getting money to post that stuff. That's just because that's how I carry a gun every day. And I started working for Filster because I was just like answering people's questions in the Filster concealment workshop. And I had been shooting some USPSA from concealment and different things. And Sarah Hopman just reached out to me and was like, hey, you're really helpful when you answer questions. Do you want to get paid to do that from us? And I was like, sure. So I help people, I answer questions, but that's the extent kind of my payment. So anything nice I say about them, they're not making me do that. It's just
they're not making me do it either. I will do it all day, every day for nothing. It's just been a game changer for me. I just really believe in the product. That's really all it is. It's just like when something like that makes the way that you carry every single day so easy, where you don't even have to worry at all. It's like, why would I not want to tell everybody I know, honestly? So
100%. And, one of the things that I love about Filster, just because, now that I've worked for them for a few years, I know everybody, the owners are so nice and they are constantly trying to make upgrades to the product. So like the V2 that we just talked about, that is all just because they kept hearing the same complaints from folks about the leg leash or the material of the belt or the, you know, lack of texture on the faceplate. And they're like, we can just change that. Let's just give the people what they want. So we're constantly trying to make improvements, and our customer service team, they're awesome. The average time to respond to a customer service request is like less than 5 minutes. So if you've got questions, if you have an Enigma at home and you're like, I don't know, I got overwhelmed, I took it out of the bag and I didn't know where to start, we have 2 free Zoom classes every month. Tessa and I teach a class on Zoom. They usually take about an hour and a half, where we walk you through, like from start to finish, how to put it on, how to use the clasps, like every single little detail you could think of. And then we go one-on-one through the participants and answer their questions. They put their gun on and we show them like where we would move it if we were there, if we had their body type, and try to help them kind of troubleshoot comfort problems they're having. So that's just like a free resource that you get access to if you decide to get an Enigma.
That is above and beyond, especially this day and age, above and beyond.
We definitely want people to be happy with the product. You know, I tell folks all the time, if you're not comfortable, you're not going to carry a gun every day. And I want you to carry a gun every day. So when I do my concealment classes for my chapter, my goal is to help them find something that works for them, whether it's an Enigma or something else. Like use the principles and the educational resources that we have to help your carry system, whatever it is, work well for you. Because if you're not comfortable, you're going to leave your gun at home.
Yeah, the concepts don't just apply to the Enigma. They are just concealment principles that apply to every setup. So that's why they're so valuable. Yeah, and your education, I send people to the Filster YouTube all the time because those educational videos are so well done. They're easy to consume and understand, and they're done really well. So it just sounds like, it sounds like I'm getting paid by Filster too, but I am not. I just honestly tell everybody about it. Now tell me then about, I want to wrap up here in a little bit, but tell me a little bit about Gun Owners Radio. Is that a new thing that you've been a part of, or has that been for a while?
I'm trying to think when I started coming on the show. It was probably like January of 2025. So about a year and a half, I think. And that just it was just one of those things that like fell in my lap. So I was already working for Filster. I was running the San Diego chapter, teaching a lot, and I started getting more politically involved through our local PAC, which is called San Diego County Gun Owners. And if you are in a state that is not 2A friendly, you want to model your your PAC exactly like San Diego County Gun Owners, because they have done so much good stuff for San Diego County and the state of California in general. But Michael Schwartz is the director of SDCGO, and he's one of the co-hosts on Gun Owners Radio. And so I knew him through San Diego County Gun Owners and some of the lawsuits that they were working on. I'm a plaintiff on one of their lawsuits against the state of California right now. And so I knew him through that, and he had seen me on some different podcasts and had heard me teach, and he reached out and said, you know, I think you would be really fun on the show if you're interested. And at the time I was like, I don't know if I have time to do another thing. So I was like, are you going to come up with all the stories and I'm just going to show up and give my opinion? And he said, yes. I was like, all right, I'm in, you know, as long as I don't have to prep. So it's been like a year and a half, and it is honestly one of the most fun things I do. I love being opinionated. I love politics. You know, I love anything Second Amendment. And so we cover, you know, defensive gun uses. We cover, you know, anything that's pro or anti 2A in California. We talk about, you know, how silly Moms Demand Action and some of those other organizations are when it comes to, you know, the statistics that they have, and, you know, do a little bit of myth busting and things like that. So it's a lot of fun. But that is a show that comes out once a week, and it's on YouTube and Spotify and anywhere you.
Oh yeah, we need to plug these. Thank you for the reminder. So if anyone wants to learn more about you, they can go to DakotaAdelphia.com. Adelphia is spelled Adelphia. And then, Gun Owners Radio on YouTube. And then you're on Instagram and Facebook.
Yep. Facebook is just under my name. And then my Instagram is Life with Adelphia. And I do a lot of different things on Instagram. It's not just gun related. I share my dogs and my home renovation and, workouts and things like that too. But a lot of it is focused on, anything to do with the firearms industry, work that I'm doing. And then obviously, I mentioned earlier about like growing up, I had this kind of survival instinct. I think that a lot of times when we get into shooting, a lot of people tend to forget about all those other things that are really, really important, like having fire extinguishers in your car and in your house, and, making sure that you have life insurance and a plan for who would call your attorney if you needed one. Like just those kinds of common sense things tend to, I think, get forgotten under the excitement of carrying a gun and shooting and practicing and competing. And so I also talk a lot about, the importance of tourniquets, and have you refreshed your Stop the Bleed lately? And, are you a good defensive driver? Do you know how to avoid getting hit by somebody who's driving crazy? Like, just things that I think are also important pieces of living a long and healthy life that maybe other gun people may not talk about as much. But I try to be well-rounded on there. So
you are so well-rounded. Yeah. All those things that you just mentioned, I'm like, yes, that, and yes, that, and yes, that. And that's what's so funny is because I was just thinking about that. You're well-rounded from like the survival perspective. And I agree with everything you're saying. And I've touched on those things on my show, but like what I look at more is, I guess the more, how would I say it? Intangible things. So like mental fitness for me is really, really important. Spiritual fitness for me is really, really important, and physical fitness. And that trifecta for me feels like the foundation for everything else that I do, and I had it so backwards when I first started. I started with the gun because I thought the gun was the thing that was going to make me feel safe. Like many people start that way, right? Yeah. Especially women who have gone through something. It's like, I have to get a gun now and I have to learn how to shoot it. And that's going to make me safe. And then what I learned was, no, that does not make me safe. In fact, in some cases, it makes me a liability, not only to myself, but others, or it can, if I'm not able to make good decisions under high stress situations, right? And adding a gun to that just compounds the situation, right? Because then it's a lethal encounter potentially. So the responsibility of that is exponentially heightened by the fact that there's a firearm introduced into this self-defense thing. And so I guess part of my mission has always been just like trying to educate people as much as I can in helping them, especially women, because I have a really soft spot like you for women, of being like, I'm basically just talking to the 10 year ago me. When I talk to, like, when you hear my videos of advice, it's just me talking to myself 10 years ago, right? That's all it is. And it's like all the things I wish I knew and all the things I wish I would have focused on then to help build that, like, more resilience and confidence and awareness that I didn't quite have. And I felt like I ended up developing finally, but the gun came first. And I didn't really look at that other stuff to begin with, I guess.
What was a moment for you where you realized, like, hey, I need some of this other stuff because the gun isn't enough? Was it like a force on force class? Like, what was the thing where you were like, oh, wait, I need work in these other areas?
I don't know that there was a situation I was put in necessarily where I felt like inadequate. Probably in training is where I figured that out, because as I started training more and more, those kind of things started to get tested more and more. My decision-making skills, my physical fitness. I mean, if you're in an Adam Winch class, you're probably going to get tested with your physical fitness at least a little bit. And just a tiny bit of that stress and pressure can make you shoot totally differently if you're not used to it. I mean, just having a higher heart rate by itself can really mess you up and scramble your brain if you can't stay focused and calm under pressure. And yeah, there were some intense Adam Winch classes that I guess I can think about where, I mean, I held my own, but I realized I was inadequate in some ways and that I could get a lot better. So, and then the fact, too, early on for me, like I remember finally getting the gun, and then do you know the feeling of like feeling like it's like this big when you first wear it for the first time? Like it feels so obvious, like
Everyone is looking at it.
everyone can see it, and that's not true, but it feels that way, And I remember for like the longest time, I was scared to put a round in the chamber and walk around with it. I mean, I went through everything that all the women that come to me, go through now. And then just like, laying in bed at night, thinking about it, like, okay, if I'm carrying this thing around, all the what if scenarios start like popping in my head. And I think at the end of the day, I just realized, man, if something really went down, like for real, I don't really know for sure. I don't really know for sure if I could handle myself. I don't really know for sure if I could stay calm. I don't really know for sure. So then that was just like the thing for me is like, I have to get more training. I have to immerse myself in training that builds on those things as much as possible. So I can really test in a safe environment to see how would I really make decisions under that kind of pressure. And so that's when I started like getting into more of the, I don't know if that's even intermediate or advanced training. That's just basic training really. But
people can go years and years of taking classes and never be asked those questions or never be tested in those ways. So
right.
While like to us, it is basic training and everybody should be doing it. I think it's also common for folks to get really far in their journey without having actually gotten to the point where they're thinking about those types of things.
Right. Probably. I mean, there's a lot of shooters that I've met that have done a lot of gun training, but it's all been just stand and deliver flat gun range stuff. There's been very little movement, if any at all. And if it was movement, it was like lateral duck walk movement, which doesn't really count, And then if almost none of the people I run into have done any kind of real decision making type drills or the drills where you actually like have to de-escalate a situation or talk to somebody, and make a decision. Is this lethal or non-lethal? Is this pepper spray? Is this run away? Is this, and that was where it's like, I mean, even now I've been training for years and years and I still am like, I definitely need to make sure that kind of training is like always pretty on the forefront for me, because those kind of things aren't just like natural for everybody, I mean, it requires training and thought and being put under pressure in different ways and a Girl and a Gun does great with that. Like at the national conference, the variety of classes just keeps expanding. I noticed even just this year, I was, of course, talking with all the girls I know that went. And I'm like, so tell me, what classes did you take? And they're telling me about and I was like, oh, these are new classes. I've never heard of these. And so that's really exciting. You guys just keep expanding. It's like never ending. It's awesome.
It is awesome. I think for anyone who's listening, who's like wondering how to get some of this training or, starting to think about that, I think an important thing for us all to know is like, what is our natural response when something bad happens? And most of us can probably think back to a situation, maybe a car accident that you witnessed or you were part of, or seeing somebody have a medical emergency where you called 911. Think about, what did I feel? Was I making smart choices in that moment? Or was I kind of, flustered or didn't know what to do? And I think a lot of times if we can think through how do we react, we get to start figuring out what do we need to work on. And like for me, I knew that I've always kind of been, I was a lifeguard. I dealt with a lot of injured people, and I had been the first on the scene of a few car accidents when I was younger. And, I kind of knew how I respond to like problems, and I can generally be pretty chill. But I knew about myself as well that I have kind of a little bit of an anger switch. And so if somebody cuts me off in traffic, like maybe I'll say things out loud in my car that I shouldn't say. And so for me, once I kind of knew, okay, like that's the thing I'm going to have to think about. That's the thing I'm going to have to remind myself that no altercation, somebody cutting me in line or not putting their cart back or cutting me off in traffic, like none of those things are worth me getting into a verbal altercation that could lead to a physical altercation because I have a gun on. And that means that any altercation I get in could become a lethal altercation. And that was scary for me. And I had to do a lot of work to kind of learn how to decompress a little bit, anger management, a little bit. So, you know, if you think about yourself and like, you know, what's the thing that's like the easiest kind of easy pickings for you to work on? I think everyone can think of something, and that's a good place to start. It doesn't have to be on the range, expensive, you know, force on force training. It could start with just like learning yourself, figuring out what you need to work on emotionally, mentally, and then making progress towards that.
Totally agree. And, you know yourself better than anyone. I know myself better than anyone. And we all are different. We all have gaps in different areas. You know, it's not a one size fits everybody. And I think know thyself is a very good concept to know for sure. And the way you know yourself is you do hard things and you find out who you really are.
Yes.
Wasn't that a great way to tie a bow on it?
That was perfect. Brought it all the way back around.
It was a little bit of a stretch, but I made it there. Well, Dakota, you've been a pleasure to be on the show. Is there anything that you want to leave people with before we go? I bet I missed one or two things. There were so many topics I wanted to talk about.
No, I think that about covers it. Thank you guys for listening, and feel free to reach out if anybody has any questions.
All right. Thank you so much.